the three people watching me now. Well, this morning I came across the latest stream, the clip by Millennial Woes in his Ask Me Anything stream, and obviously I have a few things to say about it. It's only a 7-minute stream, so by all means go and listen to what he says. I don't disagree with everything he says. He started by talking about, was it porn, and censorship. So he and I are agreed that sex and violence ought to be censored. The British Board of Film Censors ought to be doing their job, and that artists also need to be censored. And of course I agree, but censored using what rules, whose rules, and why was the next question that he considered. And I don't think, it's sort of, well, we shouldn't become like the left and become as censorious as the West, but then, can people even tell the difference between what is a right-wing view or a left-wing view now, even now? Well, it's very difficult if you don't have scripture or an official handbook. And this, again, boils down to the problem of not having a religion. And of course, religion is politics, and this is a subject that he won't discuss properly or at all with me. And of course, it is a form of censorship on his part that he refuses to acknowledge my question or address any of the issues that I raise. He's not the only one, of course. There's plenty of traumatized nationalists who simply cannot bring themselves to discuss the nature and purpose of religion with me, because they would know from what I've said before where it will all be going, and they can't face it. So who is to decide what is left and what is right? I guess I'll have to appoint some person, and that person might decide wisely or unwisely what should or shouldn't be censored. But what we need really is an official handbook, and what could be more official than scripture itself? But unfortunately, nationalists are really ex-liberals, and liberals tend to be atheist and scorn religion, and I'm saying that is the problem. That is the problem of the West, in that they have no religion, and because of that they have no final authority, not even in theory, about what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is evil, and who is the supreme authority. So I, as an agnostic, would say that the hypothetical supreme being, if we're going to be agnostic, is the final authority. And I think we, failing any better ideology, we must accept it. Because it can easily be shown that all the problems of the West is due to the fact that Western governments have been ignoring and flouting God's laws for decades. So they've got to prove, if they're going to win the argument, these liberals and atheists and nihilists, that they were quite right to ignore all the laws of God, or the laws said to be from God, and therefore they would have to, know what they are, and they would have to, God forbid, read the Koran, and that is what they cannot do, because they are so triggered by their hatred and fear that they have probably sworn long ago that they actually refuse to read it. or if they have, they will refuse to discuss it out of fear for one another in case they're ostracised for talking up Islam. But fortunately, there are a few of them who are prepared to talk about these things. So I was actually delighted when I came across the stream of Richard Spencer, Keith Woods and Ed Dutton talking about Islam, and that was, I think, about maybe 2 weeks ago. And now there's a second one confirming their position, because I was a little concerned that they might not be, they might be backtracking, they might be saying, yeah, that was just a one-off, we weren't serious, we will never discuss this subject again. And here we are, we have this second video with Ed Dutton, Richard Spencer and Keith Woods. So that's very, very hopeful, because it sounds like they mean to double down on it. And the positivity with which Richard Spencer has been discussing Islam is, well, it seems to me to be undiminished. I don't know what others are saying about it, but I'm delighted it's been discussed at last. Because all matters of politics are really matters of morality, and of course all matters of morality are rooted in religion. So, anyway, he didn't go on to resolve the question except give his opinion. He did. The other thing I agreed with Millennial Woes was that hate speech takes away human dignity. Adults should be left alone to discuss whatever they want if they're not inciting crime or violence or subversion. And he complains quite rightly that people, grown men, are treated like infantilized, are treated as infantilized and in a kindergarten, and that also being able to complain is self-cleansing, and freedom of speech is what is required if we are to have any human dignity in a civilized society. But then he goes on to say that only white indigenous people of the West ought to have this freedom, and people who have just arrived have no right to, and these are his words, deconstruct our society. And he further went on to give an example, to posit a scenario whereby he went to China and said rude things about the Chinese and whatever. And he was saying that he would be deported, and he would expect that to happen, and he was saying that he wouldn't do such a thing. I know that he's said he's wanted to deport me quite a few times before anyway, so I mean it's no big deal, but let us just examine the wisdom of this proposal. Now, I did say yesterday that you actually can't stop people talking about you. They can say anything, really. They don't even have to have visited your country or even known a member of your race or religion or your nationality. They can launch straight in and say that you're all barbarians and all kinds of rude, possibly untrue things. So you can't really stop people from talking shit about you, basically. Should you be allowed to stop them from talking shit about you? Well, if you do believe in the principle of free speech, then you would have to say, yes, it's allowed, because I think we've all, presumed to criticise people of other races, religions and nationality that we haven't even met, because we heard something that may or may not be true about them. But I do wonder how he proposes to police this, because every proposal has to, if you want it to become law, you will have to say, well, right, from now on, non-white people can't criticize white people, for example. So but he might say, I didn't mean it to sound so racist. I meant indigenous, native born, or whatever. Or he might say, well, if you're a citizen of the country, then you should be allowed to criticize your country, even if you're not white, or not the same skin color as the majority. I don't know. I don't, it would be nice to go through it with him, but he doesn't want to talk to me. So that's a kind of censorship. So why is censorship bad, other than that of taking away our human dignity and treating us as, as infantilized? There is a further reason, which he didn't mention, which is that of getting the information we need to solve and avoid problems. So, it really wouldn't matter for me that people would presume to criticize me, though of course if they're defaming me, then of course that shouldn't be allowed, and I could take legal action against them. And hopefully the courts are working properly and I will get justice, because if I don't get justice, I might be tempted to take the law into my own hands if I knew that there would be no point going to the court, because, although I suffered real damage to my reputation, I would, whatever it is, it doesn't even have to be about libel, and so people will take the law into their own hands, and this would be a bad thing, because it would cause civil disorder, revolution, and eventually the toppling of whichever government that has allowed this state of affairs to persist. I may be taking it too personally, but I really do think that when he said non-white people shouldn't be allowed to just come here and deconstruct our society, what does deconstruct our society mean? It's very vague, isn't it? He makes it sound like the people he doesn't like, Jews, Muslims, non-whites, sort of come to his country and, taken it apart or something. But if you deconstruct, you see, it's the use of these words, these vague words, that I really, really have an issue with. I'm happy to put up my hands to all the things I've said, and if you think I've made a mistake or whatever, I'm always happy to discuss it. So deconstruct society. What does this mean? Does it mean I'm challenging the status quo? Yes, of course I am, and why shouldn't I? I think there are grave, long-standing problems that would cause disaster and destruction if unaddressed. So why shouldn't I voice my concerns? And if my concerns are unfounded, then surely somebody should be talking to me and saying, there, Claire, You're worrying about nothing at all. It'll be all right. It's all in good hands now. Don't you worry about a thing. Has anybody said that to me? That whose moral and intellectual authority I could respect? I would say no. Henry Claymore says in the chat that I think I have a right to your land. Well, you see, you use all these words and, do you own property? Have I claimed ownership over your property? Of course not. So what you mean is I'm residing in your country and you want to deport me like Millennial Woes does because I said some things that you don't like. I suppose I could be even a member of your race and religion, and I could be exiled because that was a common form of punishment to send somebody into exile. So my problem is really well, of course I would expect the peasants to get upset, because they won't be able to understand the nuances of my thinking. And they'll just get angry. Oh, you're attacking our religion, you're attacking our political system, how dare you? And then I'll say, well, anyone can really. You can attack the religion and political system of anyone in another country, so why can't they do it to you? And there's no good answer to that. And you can say, I'm doing it in a destructive way or I'm doing it in a constructive way. So I have no way of knowing this until you have a proper dialogue with me, not this sort of hit and run, you should be deported and then going away and never speaking to me again. Because, what, you're too afraid to speak to me? You can't develop your argument? What's your problem, Millennial Woes? So you're saying that your religion and your political system is working perfectly fine? Then why are you always whinging, Millennial Whinge? Anyway, I've been vindicated, I think. Richard Spencer, Ed Dutton, and Keith Woods are talking about religion. They're talking about Islam, something that Millennial Woes is too neurotic to discuss, I suppose. So at least there are some white men prepared to tackle controversial issues and ask genuine questions about it. If only they would speak to me. Is it because I don't have the status with which to discuss my ideas? Is it because I'm unclear, I'm incoherent? Or there's some other reason that prevents secular Koranism from being discussed? I wonder if Ed Dutton, Keith Woods and Richard Spencer have themselves read the Koran, because that would be a start, wouldn't it? Or perhaps they're too afraid of admitting that they've read it. Indeed, Richard Spencer in that stream of his was, what's it called? It's not called the, well, you know the one I mean. The second one, with Keith Woods and Ed Dutton talking about Islam again. So he and Ed Dutton were basically complaining that by talking up Islam, they've upset quite a few white nationalists who, and one of the comments that they'd received was, even even if there is something to learn from Islam, we cannot discuss it. And they kind of fell about laughing, saying, well, what kind of ridiculous, backward caveman kind of reasoning, was that. So, well, I'm glad something is happening. There's some movement, some development of thought, some progress of thinking about what the problem really is. I suppose there's a possibility that my contribution to this will not be acknowledged. I know I've been the one who for years and years and years have been talking about secular Koranism since 2009. And I suppose it's perfectly possible for these white men to pretend that they would have reached their conclusions all by themselves. And I don't particularly deny that, but I know that I am quite often the catalyst and accelerator for these things. I like to think that white Sharia was kind of my baby. I think it was mentioned in 2011, and secular Koranism was first mentioned in 2009. So, in terms of, timeline narratives, I could claim that that white Sharia was probably probably came from secular Koranism. Henry Claymore asks, why do you so desperately crave to speak to white nationalist thought leaders? Why do you care either way? Well, obviously, if I'm a political activist, I would have to participate in the great political debates of the day, and it's immigration. It's about national identity, national sovereignty, neoliberalism, neoconservatism, and all these things are the concern of the white man. So I just don't see how I can possibly avoid it, even with the best will in the world. Okay, if I were to participate in political activism, how could I even ignore any of these issues when everybody's talking about it? And in fact, the entire discourse of Western politics is about immigration, is about feminism. And obviously all these problems are caused by the failure of their religion and their political system. And I live here, don't you forget. And obviously these things are my concern too, because bad government affects everyone, of every race, of every religion, happening, if they live in that nation. So I don't know why you're pretending to be so surprised that only white people would be interested in these things. If you have an interest, well, anyone who is the citizen of a particular country would have an interest in good government. So yeah, that's a kind of really backward question. I've been accused of being part of the Jew movement. I don't even know what that means, since I'm not a Jewess. But obviously, since the alt-right are forever whinging about Jews and Muslims, that would come under my area of investigation, shall we say. So if I know that white people are triggered about Jews and Muslims, then of course I need to investigate that too. And of course, the worst thing you can think of to say to each other is accuse each other of being Jews. And so you're now accusing me of being Jewish just because I take an interest in the same topics that you're interested in. But I know there's really no reasoning with so many of you, because you are you are actually mentally ill and traumatized and unable to accept the truth of your position, able to understand the logic of my thinking, in that bad government affects everyone subject to that government. So, I guess it's an affectation, pretending that you don't know why anyone of any other, of a colour different to you, of a religion different to you, would wish to concern themselves in the politics of your government if it's also the government that rules over them. So I know I'm just talking to a bunch of primitives. I mean, it would be nice to talk to some public intellectual, just somebody who has some kind of moral or intellectual authority. And unfortunately, that is my problem. I can't get their attention, or they know who I am, but they don't want to talk to me because they don't want to give my ideas the oxygen of publicity, because they already know they're going to lose the argument to me, which I guess is why Millennial Woes won't talk to me. I mean, I've noticed that he does talk to non-white people, as a display of his, non-racism and magnanimity, but he won't talk to me. Why not? And, if he's afraid of losing the argument, then, he really should think like, okay, you lose the argument. But so what? If you lose the argument, then it means that the position that you hold is morally and intellectually indefensible. So it's quite right that you should lose the argument. And you should have the honesty to concede that when you have lost the argument, so you won't be, saying, oh, but I've lost the argument, but I'm not going to admit it. So because I don't want to say a different thing to my followers. But then you'd be telling them the wrong thing, wouldn't you? Or you could be like the person who lost a game of chess and flicks the board over. Because, well, it just means you've lost. The winner wouldn't be doing such a thing. So by the very act of having a tantrum, it means you've lost the argument. And if you won't admit that you've lost the argument, then you will be presumably carrying on in your error and continuing on your road to perdition. It seems extraordinary that you haven't already worked this out. And this is evidenced by, so many nationalists who point blank refuse to discuss with me what they think religion is for. They already know. They already know where it's going. Because I'll be saying, fancy a little bit of secular Koranism now that Christianity is kaput. And they don't want to deal with that. But that's what they'll have to do. So yeah, that's all I'm going to say on the matter. I guess it'll take you just for how many more years before the penny will drop that your Christianity is kaput and you need something else, and you can't do without one. You can't decide you all want to be neo-pagans, and you do know that you can't do that, don't you? You don't have time. You don't have time to start a new religion that you will all like. You know you can't do that. Not even if you already had kicked out all the Jews and Muslims and non-whites. You still wouldn't be able to, amongst yourselves, agree on a new religion, because there will be some white people there who say, well, we want to be Christians, and then you'll have another group of white people saying, oh no, we want to be Muslims, and then there'll be another group who say, we don't want any religion, and then there'll be another lot, they'll say, we want to be neo-pagans, and then amongst the neo-pagans they'll be fighting each other about which pagan deity to deify. A sensible question at last from Henry Claymore. What is the difference between secular Koranism and regular Islam? Well, proper Islam would require Sharia, i.e., laws that Muslims follow. And most Muslims will not only be following the Quran, but also the Hadith, and there's just lots of made up crap in there, which ordinary Orthodox Muslims cannot ignore, because that would mean that they would be called heretics. They would be treated as heretics by other Muslims. So they don't want to go there. There are Muslims called Koranists who basically say, we just want to follow the Quran, we reject the Hadith, but they're treated as heretics by these other Muslims. And I'm a Koranist in that I read the Quran and I think it's fair enough. And secular Koranism is basically the Quran as I interpret it. I, a former atheist, and an agnostic, an ex-feminist, and ex-liberal, and I've lived in the West for quite a while. I understand your culture and your ways of thinking, and secular Koranism is intended to be Islam Lite. So I would be interpreting it in a liberal way, in a non-interventionist way, but also in a literal way. I'm not going to say, oh, I'm just going to ignore the bits I don't like, because that would put me in the position of being asked, well, how do we know that your selection is trustworthy? So I have to say I'm going to implement it all, and implement it as accurately as I can. And I'm quite confident that I'm able to do this without being guilty of inhumanity and fanaticism or irrationality. So this is what I'd like to discuss, and of course I can't really get Jews to discuss it, or because it's like nobody wants to read the Quran. Because nobody likes reading these days, or they're afraid to be seen reading it, because they have this superstitious fear of being, I don't know, converted or something. I've asked a few rabbis, and they kind of say, we don't want to read it, we don't have to read it, you can't make us, we've been told not to read it. So there lies that difficulty, and my way of getting around it is to try and get Muslims to donate a large cash prize to pay for my proposed rabbi-only essay writing competition about why secular Koranism is no-hide observant. I'm afraid that the Muslims are just not helping themselves. I've tried to reach out to them, and a few of them have responded, but they're just not really political activists. They don't like each other. They fight with each other in more or less the same way that the alt-right does. They have their feuds and their petty doctrinal differences, and of course the problem is that they have no leader either. So it's almost impossible to deal with them, and not all of them are Muslim scholars. So again, they are useless. I mean, it would be nice to talk to somebody with some religious, moral, intellectual authority, but then somebody like that, such as Tim Winter, Abdal, Hakim, Murad, will fear to engage because it's all so controversial and might get him into trouble and whatever. So, and of course, it's also difficult talking to the big rabbis, the ones that you will have heard of, because they will have their book deals and slots on Thought for the Day, and they don't want to rock the boat too much because they don't want to be ostracized and end up sitting with us basically. So it's all a lot of I must look after my own patch. I know what the bounds that I cannot transgress, or I will end up on the scrap heap of the alt-right. And I guess my problem is that I fall between two stools. I don't just regurgitate alt-right crap, to pander to the alt-right. I will say whatever I think is the truth, and I'm not going to change my message just because people don't like it. Because if I did, I would have lost my identity a long time ago, wouldn't I? I mean, there's no point, just agreeing with your whole package and end up, proposing the deportation of myself, is there? So, as it is, I can only make arguments for civic nationalism, and I'm basically saying that Judaism is divine ethno-nationalism, so there's no point you even fantasizing about killing or kicking them out, because many extinct empires have tried to do the same thing, and they're no longer around. But the Jews still are, so I guess just because they will, that they do have the protection of the most powerful deity imaginable, we should maybe leave them alone. And not that they are beyond criticism. We can I have quite strong ideas about putting them on a register and making sure that they can't have the best of both worlds. The problem is that they, and I think this is actually the fault of liberals, in that they've kind of said that you can be a good Jew and a good liberal, and I think the problem is that nobody can be a decent person and still be a good liberal. And I would like to make that argument, but nobody will debate with me. because I'm such a good debater, I always win every debate. Possibly, but I could be the victim of my own success, I suppose. So what I'm saying to ethno-nationalists is that really you may think it's all about race, but actually it's about status. And status can be adjusted with the changing of the rules. And I'm quite happy to... Well, I'm taking a risk, aren't I? And I'm saying you'll be happier once the patriarchy is restored. And then you won't feel the urge to kick everyone out, because then you'll feel that everything is, being run on a rational long-term basis, and not this sort of crazy that the patriarchy would give you, and not this crazy crap that a matriarchy is currently doing. And I think this is a problem with most people. I mean, we're getting lots of chaos and disorder, terrorism, and mad acts, murderers and stabbers, because people are angry and afraid, and there's nothing that the matriarchy is doing to allay those fears. They're just saying, shut up. or you'll lose your job, you'll lose your Facebook account, you'll be kicked off Twitter, YouTube, whatever. And because we don't get a rational response that we can, that is in any way reassuring, because every time they do that, people just get more frightened and angry, and then they know that the government isn't listening. They just want us to shut up, and that's it. And then, the realization comes that the government doesn't know what it's doing either. So, people will get frightened and angry. And I'm basically saying that I can manage the situation, but only if I can be put in a position where I am in a position to do something. And currently, I'm not getting the validation I feel I deserve, either in the alt-right or in the political establishment. And that is because I fall between two stools. So for the alt-right, I don't hate Jews, I don't hate Muslims, and for the political establishment, they'll think I'm being too anti-liberal, because what I propose is in fact a one-party theocracy. So what is the way out of this obstruction? Well, it would be good if there were people prepared to, educated, if there were educated and morally authoritative people prepared to discuss it with me. But I fear that people just don't want to be seen to be talking to me. So all they're left with is a tactic of ignoring me and pretending I don't exist. But I think I have kind of seeped through the consciousness of both the Western political establishment as well as those who oppose it. I know they're not supposed to mention my name or talk about secular Koranism. But sometimes it's in a way it's better. You see, when it's like the Liberal Party in the UK, that liberalism is everywhere, so much so that there doesn't even need to be a Liberal Party anymore, because it's sort of merged with everything, the liberal ideas in the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, even in UKIP, because its former leader Nigel Farage called himself a classical liberal. And there is so much confusion in the minds of angry, white, frightened Westerners about the ideology that they claim to be supporting. So, spring is coming up. People should, do a kind of spring clean of their minds about, what certain words mean, like what nationalism means, what conservatism means, its origins, as well as what liberalism means. And we all kind of need to take out the carpet and beat it hard. Or whatever it is that people do. So Henry Claymore asks, why did you start believing in the necessity of patriarchy? Well, it took me a while to work it out. When I started blogging, I started with just a voice of reason, and that was a kind of general. Well, it was my only blog, and then I found a lot of things on feminism that I wanted to talk about, and I found that I had so much to say about feminism that I started a separate blog called the Battlefield of Love, which you can still find, and that kind of merged with Islam, and then eventually so much of what I was posting was about feminism. So I thought, well, I don't want to post, because you think, oh, I've got to post on Battlefield of Love, and then I've got to post on Voice of Reason. Oh, it's such a pain. Let's merge it. So I've merged it, and then after that, I found I had lots of things to say about Judaism. So I started another blog called the Radicalised Rabbi, and so that's kind of keeping its own distinct identity, because not everything I say is about Judaism, but I think almost everything I say is sort of rooted in the problem of feminism, which only a religion effective at maintaining minimum standards of sexual morality will solve, will address. So I'm saying feminism prevents men from organising in order to deal with their internal and external enemies. And this seems obvious to me, because if there were any leadership in the alt-right, things would have happened now. But as it is, it's just a kind of movement, like the hippie movement. So we don't know even now who was the leader of the hippie movement, because it was just a lot of people, with long hair, dressed up, wearing beads and hippie clothes and stuff, and that's it. They just sort of smoked pot and enjoyed free love, and that was it. But obviously, if you want something done, you need a leader. Even if you just want to go from A to B and you don't know the way, you need a leader. And Western men are now so demoralised that they don't even want a leader, because they don't want to be subject to the inconvenience of obeying his orders and then of being betrayed by him. And of course this expectation is caused by past experience of having, disappointing leaders, such as in the UK, Nick Griffin. And a problem with Nick Griffin was that here's what I would have done differently if I'd been leader. I would have just said, I would have said all the things that would appeal to the middle classes, and gone easy on the racism. Okay, I would have just done everything I'm doing now. Okay, I would have said all those things, and just to see what would happen. But I think too many politicians will stop themselves from saying things that they know to be true in order to avoid trouble. But I'm saying even the trouble I get into is a development in the narrative. And really, so far, I have no regrets. So I think I now have the reputation of really saying what I mean and meaning what I say, and being prepared to discuss it and being prepared to defend it, while lesser men have run away and only adopted hit-and-run guerrilla tactics against me, saying, oh, but Claire, she's so stupid, she's so mad, she's so blah, 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 and then refuse to say any more. I know the mainstream media who when they were writing about me, there's now a news blackout against me, won't discuss my ideas. And of course I want them to say secular Koranism, one-party theocracy, and they don't even dare to say that. They don't even dare to actually say what my biggest idea is about. So I don't mind, I was just talking, asking people today on Ask FM, oh please join Ask FM, I mean, it's such fun, it really is. Millennial Woes was on it, years ago, until I suppose he just complained that I spoilt it for him and drove him off it, or whatever. But I don't think I don't think I did, even though he was complaining that I was asking him too many questions. And it was like, well, just don't answer my questions if you don't like them. There's no need to complain like a girl. Delete them, whatever. But he would just complain. And this is a problem of so many men. It's like, they're behaving like women. And they don't even know they're behaving like women. And the men around them don't know that they're behaving like women. Only I, a woman, knows that they are behaving like women. And of course women know. It's like, okay, a man can say, oh, a woman is very unfeminine because of, what she says and does and whatever. And it's like, yeah, actually it's the opposite sex that most recognises the qualities that they ought to have, particularly when they fail to have it. And anyway, you're going to call me unfeminine, and I'm saying I don't care. I'm not here to find a mate, right? I'm here to tell you the stuff I want to tell you, and you owe it to yourselves to consider whether what I say is true or not true. And if you have any questions, you really should ask me on Ask FM. That Millennial Woes no longer uses. Because he used to use it as a way of getting ideas for his next video, but now he's just doing AMAs, which is actually quite unimaginative. You could do a really good one by, having me on as a guest. But he dares not, and that's the thing, it's all this failure of courage. Very unmanly. But yeah, I understand you haven't exactly been taught about masculinity in your co-ed schools. And this is something I would do. I would make all secondary schools single sex, because obviously, having all these women around you is making you neurotic and distracting you, and making it impossible for you to be men. Because you're more interested in getting pussy than getting things done. Until you get to the stage where you actually think that your status is somehow linked to how much sex you get. I mean, yeah, you could say, if I'm the, rock star, then I should get all these groupies. But, when your women are so cheap, it's not really a much of an achievement. I think it was John Bercow who said, when he was in his university days, that you don't really need to do much to impress a girl these days. You just have to have reasonably good manners and a credit card, and you'll get any woman. So this is something, men and women ought to be thinking about their minimum standards of sexual morality. Well, I'm no Puritan, but I'm just saying that no reason why we're not supposed to have premarital sex is because we don't want to have illegitimate offspring, which would be the conclusive evidence of the fact that we have had extramarital sex, thereby making us unsuitable for marriage. And it's of course the point I keep coming to again and again, that not respecting the institution of marriage, the practice of marriage, that has caused so many problems for Western man. And now he can't even think of abolishing no-fault divorce, because even though that would restore the patriarchy, he's no longer interested in restoring the patriarchy, because he doesn't think he's actually marriageable, and even if he were, he's probably gay, or can't face the idea of marrying a woman of his own race and paying for her children. So there are all these, unstated concerns that Western man is not even thinking about when he makes his political decisions. And his political leaders are not thinking for him in those terms. They are content to ignore these long-standing problems of being able to rear the next generation in optimum conditions. And if you don't care about good parenting, then I'm afraid the next generation will be even more useless and retarded and degenerate than the current generation. And then, when everyone in the world knows that you're getting stupider and more degenerate, then of course they'll come to your countries and take your stuff. Why isn't your government doing anything about it? It's because it's a matriarchy. A matriarchy is basically short-termist. And a matriarchy is, of course, established on the foundations of illegitimacy, of widespread illegitimacy, the condoning of widespread illegitimacy, the false idea that extramarital sex is a right, is a human right. And they won't be talking about degeneracy, and if you talk to them, they'll be gay or atheist, or saying that there are too many people in the world anyway, and people should stop having children. So we really need to divide people up into those who can see the moral imperative of restoring the patriarchy, and those who don't. And amongst those who don't, who may be persuaded, and who okay, you have to divide the people who don't see the point of restoring the patriarchy between those who can be persuaded to restore the patriarchy and those who never will. And it is within this group of people that that will be the soldiers of the patriarchy. And then we can be men and women. I suppose one of the great unasked questions is what happens if you're an unmarried mother, if you're an unmarried father? And I'm saying really, don't worry about it. We all make mistakes. We do things that we didn't know were things we shouldn't do at the time, and of course, in all religions there is always the option of repentance. And this is what I propose to do. That you I would keep a list of people who say, yeah, I done wrong, I repent, and you will be raised in status again, even though you might have 10, for example, illegitimate offspring. But if you're, one with 10, the first of the people with 10 illegitimate offspring to repent, then you will be raised in status over those who, repented a little slower than you and got in touch with me. So actually, you people, you sinners, do have an important role to play in this. I don't want people to think I'm I just have this sort of hang 'em, flog 'em idea with no nuance or flexibility. What I want is really people capable of asking intelligent questions what's going to, difficult questions. I like difficult questions, particularly ones I haven't previously considered. Of course, there are quite a few that I already have answered myself and wish people would ask, but I know how kind of slow they are. So that's it really. Thank you all for listening. Aaron is here. I'll just finish quickly dealing with Henry Claymore's questions. How do you know they know of your existence, and who is they? The political establishment, yes, they do know about me because they did write about me. I've had people from the Conservative Party telling me that, the whole of Portcullis House knows about you, Claire. And Portcullis House is as well the civil servants and, it's an office building for political staff, researchers and everything. So, yeah, they do know about me. I have joined the Conservative Party and I have been expelled from it. Apparently several generations of university undergraduates have liked my Facebook pages until they were deleted by Facebook. I have spoken to the BBC and they have heard of me. Okay, I am on some list on Twitter where when they have sort of categories of, offenders, and I'm in the worst category. And so, whenever they want to get rid of me, they'll find an excuse or get people to mass report me. So, in a way, my ideas are quite distinctive. Aaron asked me, what's up? Well, I've been talking for about an hour now. I should also say, should I say it here or should I make a separate stream about it? I got a warning on this channel because I think it's because I platformed Vincent, because the last time I got a strike it was him. But for some reason, when he goes and talks to other channels, those channels don't get strikes. But mine does. I appealed it. But I suppose it doesn't matter. They're saying, this is just a warning. And my appeal is on the basis of, well, he did say those things, and I contradicted him. So why should I? I mean, wouldn't it be useful? I mean, just supposing I was Jewish and I was just listening to the thing. I mean, obviously I wouldn't like, all the things, all the assumptions people like Vincent would make of my tribe, supposing I was Jewish. But Vincent was allowed to say what he thought Jews were doing, and I said, well, maybe it's because of this, maybe it's because of that, and I thought I made a fairly good defence of it, and I actually went through it and time-stamped it, and you can find it on the Radicalised Rabbi, all the topics that were discussed, if not the actual transcript. And I thought I, did a reasonably good job. But now, I guess, you'll never know. I mean, I have appealed it, so I suppose in theory it's possible that they'll, decide to allow it in the end. But I'm just saying, for Jews, I think what I'm doing should be considered quite helpful. But there's no rhyme or reason. Even Richard Spencer and Ed Dutton were complaining about, not that the left were mass reporting them, but that members of the alt-right were reporting them. So, it looks like there is nobody really gets free speech apart from me. And, yeah, actually, I will do a separate stream on that, because I do have another message to YouTube about how they should be running things with their hate speech, and I think what I propose could even be monetized, and they could actually claim a lot of credit if my idea works. So I will be doing another stream on this fairly soon. Thank you all for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to my main channel, Claire Core, if you haven't already done so. And obviously, if all my channels go down, that would be a sad thing indeed, but I won't be giving up on you people. I will be popping up again somewhere, somehow.